Welcome, everybody, to the third episode of the Two Scrooges, a Disney lore kind of podcast featuring myself, Dave Attackfortwo Solberg, and my guest is always, or my co-host is always, Scott, Bumi Jr, Alshanski. Scott, how's it going?
Doing great, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing well.
We have a friend with us today.
We do. We have with us Justin Jakxshadows Crum,
Hello.
Blue Steel expert. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm good. I'm honored to join the podcast this week.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Justin.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So Justin is here because we're going to talk about our weekend at the InkInc Invitational, where we both played a very similar Blue Steel list. But first, I want to go through shout-outs. So I'll start with the InkInc guys, Matt Hash and the team over at the InkInc team. They ran a 64-person Set 7 Invitational this weekend.
Yeah, shout out them.
Run, very fast, very awesome. In and out.
Coverage.
Top 8.
Coverage was great. Had some world-class casters. Our friend JDZ Quest was remoted in to cast the event. It's fantastic. Shout out to Funny JK, our friend Scott. I've ran into him a few times. He's a great guy, great player.
Who else are we shouting out? Anybody else? What was the name of the store? Justin, do you remember?
Omnihedral.
Omnihedral in Savage Mills, Maryland. It was awesome. It was my first time there, about an hour away.
It was super cool.
Just south of Baltimore, in between Baltimore and DC. Very nice store. Well-run. Artists. An artist was there with custom art. You can see Justin's winnings behind him. That's the Arcasia's Island Owl.
Yeah.
That he won as a door prize. It was very cool. And I think Quibbles was the store doing selling singles. So it was nice to have them too. Nice to have somebody selling singles at the venue.
Saved your run.
Yeah, did save my run because my Scrooges were stuck in Miami, so they didn't show up. And I made a blunder submitting. They allowed 4 proxies, and I made a blunder submitting the proxies. We're not going to talk about. But anyway,
submitted proxies for cards you ended up not needing. It happens to all of us.
Yeah, it happens to everybody. All right, Justin, you came in 3rd and 4th, right? Top 4?
Yes.
All right, so let me go ahead and share the PowerPoint.
Dave, how do you do at that event?
Top 8.
All right.
I lost to the eventual winner in top 8. It started out 4-0, double ID'd in, and then lost the first one.
Yeah. It was an odd cut. All of the 402s ended up in the bottom of the top 8 bracket, which I have not really ever seen before.
Yeah, that's what happens when you have a full
64.
A full 64. What I didn't realize, and it would have been interesting, is that if I had chose to play my last round, I was locked into playing my opponent again in top 8. Right, because the winner would have been 501. They would have been the 1 seed. The loser would have been 411.
Would have been the 8th seed.
And would have been the 8th seed.
Yeah. Right.
And my opponent was Purple Steel. Would have been Purple Steel, who I had beat twice. Had I known or thought about that in time, it probably was something I would have been interested in doing.
Yeah, I'm not. I was looking at the standings. I'm not sure 411 was guaranteed to make top 8. So losing that match might have knocked you out, but the way it worked out, it would have been a clean cut right there.
It would have been a clean cut. It was a clean cut because everybody else had to play. If they had realized that we chose to play it out, then somebody else could have risked it.
Right.
But as it worked out, I ended up having the best tiebreakers of the 402s. So I would probably have been okay anyway.
Yeah.
Would you like to put your PowerPoint in presentation mode for us?
Yes, I would. Are we ready?
Ready.
Ready.
All right. So, Justin, you and I worked together for this event, and we chose to play Blue Steel. We go back about 3 weeks. It did not start out like this.
No.
But this was the end result that we registered. It was 58 cards, the same. Justin, you can see yours is on the left, mine's on the right. So you elected to cut a. You played three-peat. You snuck an aerial in there, and then you cut a fishbone quill for an Along Came Zeus, whereas I played 4 fishbone quill, 4 peats.
Yep.
Probably should
I have minor regrets about that aerial. Though to be fair, if I hadn't misplayed in the semifinals, she would have actually won me the game, where Pete would not have, or Fishbone Quill would not have. But that uninkable definitely hurt me throughout the day in other scenarios.
Yeah, if I could have made one change, it would have been a second Zeus, and I don't know what I would have cut. We'll talk about a few of the more unique card choices in a second, but not having in the pivotal game 3 against Richie, the eventual champion in top 8, my Scrooge put my only Along Came Zeus on the bottom.
Ooh.
And then I knew from I knew from turn 3 forward I was going to be playing the game on hard mode because I didn't have like the premier removal spell that could flip the game back in my favor. So that made it a little more challenging. I ended up having to walk into some Rapunzel traps, and of course they were there. So that was it. So I'll go to the next slide. So how did we end up here? So the difference between our deck and others was centered around the 2 drops that we chose to play and how that affected the game plan. So I would say a lot of the more popular blue steals from the previous set were on Chicha. Zan had recently popularized playing Oswald into Fishbone Quill.
Yeah, we've seen Oswald do some nutty things.
Tipo is usually the complement to Chicha and Oswald because it helps solve your uninkable problems.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Smee is a longtime staple 2-drop of blue steel that is a complement to Chicha that goes before Fishbone Quill. Worked really well with Cogsworth. And then Sail the Azurite Sea is the one that we chose to go with alongside Tipo, foregoing a lot of, I would say, the raw power of these two, or the consistency of, say, a Mr. Smee and a Cogsworth plan, and instead electing to go with a 1-2-4 curve that would either put Hiram or Scrooge into play on turn 4.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that in your discussions, or in the discussions that I've been a part of, Scrooge is actually kind of nutty, and being able to play him a turn early consistently is an extremely strong thing to do. And that the first Scrooge, like the paying ink for, helps you play the subsequent ones for free by tapping items. So I really like the ramp plan that you guys went with.
Yeah, Smee was the easiest one to get away with the addition of Belle in set 7, both as a 3/3 herself on turn 1 and let the Storm Rage on that she can sing. Smee really got outclassed, and then with the addition of Scrooge on the turn, potentially following, if I put Mr. Smee into play on turn 2 on the draw, and then you play a Scrooge on turn 3 on your turn, Smee's very much outclassed. Smee was a card that if you go to like Moyen's LCCC deck, he was playing for originally, and then for his week 2 deck submission, he had cut that as well.
Right.
And I think he's kind of converged to where we were on the Tipo and Cell package. Chicha and Oswald are high power level, but the reason we chose to move away from those was first, we're in a steel format, which means Let the Storm Rage On and Strength of the Raging Fire are quite prevalent. And these two are very easy targets for both of those cards. In addition, they're also just uninkable, so they kind of stretch the deck building a little bit in a way that we didn't really like.
Yeah.
From a not blue steel player perspective, I think Smee is probably the weakest of these.
Yes, I would agree.
I think Smee is like an inkable gathering knowledge and wisdom in this format. I spoke with I spoke about Smee a bit after Continentals on Meyer Madness's channel, and about why I was including captains in my Amber Steel aggro deck, and it was because Genie was in the format mostly, and turning Smee sideways into a Genie was just a really awful thing to do. But now, like, we're turning Smee sideways into, the top two decks playing 4 Let the Storm Rage Ons and 4 Stinger 3s for 1. So, like, you play your Smee, you tap him once, he gets 2 lore. They blast him with Let the Storm Rage On. He goes to the bin. Congratulations, I guess.
Yeah.
And in the past, the way you get around that in Blue Steel Mirrors is by going Smee, Fishbone, Cogsworth, right? But as we did not have Cogsworth in the deck anymore, that was also a weakening factor for Mr. Smee. So like the Mr.
Yeah.
Smee Cogsworth package has been this like dual package for a long time in Blue Steel decks, and when you take out one of them, it makes the other one worse.
Yep. I
Yep.
would agree. All right, if I go to the next one, why play this over or other versions of Blue Steel? And for me, it came down to really 2 things. First, the first is just the card quality in Blue Steel is just exceptionally high, and this version plays all of the most powerful cards. So they're the older versions of Blue Steel that were, on 5-drop A Whole New World packages, like with Tinkerbell and Cogsworth. They didn't have the 3-cost songs, and so when you put Bell in your deck and you get access to those, it just seemed quite obvious in my mind to play those. I think Scrooge and Hiram Faversham are just the 2 strongest 4 drops in the game, probably. At least of the inkable ones. Maybe like a card like Genie is up there.
I mean, I think the only one that comes close is Rapunzel, and
yes.
She has hoops to jump through. Justin left us.
We lost Justin.
He's back.
He's back.
All right, I'm back. Sorry, my internet died for a moment.
Oh, no problem.
But no, I agree. Hiram and Scrooge, I think, are streets ahead of any other 4-drop in the game. They just do their thing like all the time, and you don't have to jump through hoops for it to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in addition, right, you get the popsicles and Fortispheres, which are just way better than they have any right to be. Both as cantrips that shrink your deck, and they shrink your deck in multiple ways, right? They cantrip, but you also can find them with Scrooge. You can turbo through your deck with Tamatoas. You can have absolutely insane lines in this deck that involve Sail the Azure Sea and popsicles.
Yep.
So
go ahead, Justin.
One comment I want to make about this. So in the past, Blue Steel has had a major issue with like 4 willpower, and it's had a major issue with like location aggro sort of decks, right? And one of the things that you and I both saw a bunch of, I believe, at our tournament this last weekend were these like aggressive location decks. And it turns out that the cards that we've got here, right? The Bell, the Tipo, the Scrooge, as your like turn 1 through 3 play, really gets rid of that weakness that the color combination had before.
Yeah. Shout out to Colton from Northern Virginia. He was playing an Amber Steel 20 location John Silver deck that went 4-0 in matches, except for you and me. We were I think you played him in round 6 in the feature match on Garrick's channel.
Yep.
Do you remember the Purple Steel player's name?
I don't remember the Purple Steel players, but we also there was a similar John Silver deck that both of you and I played. It was Purple Steel with Elsa's Ice Palace and John Silver.
Yeah.
Quite interesting. But unfortunately it was kind of a funny story that it happened for me and for you. I mulliganed into a hand that was Popsicle, 3 Let the Storm Rage On, and were I think 3 other just inkable cards. And so I thought my hand was terrible. My turn 1 play was the Popsicle. It drew a Bell. and my
Okay.
opponent's curve was either Chernobog's followers or Broom into Raja into the giant cobra.
Oh no.
And
no.
my first 3 turns of the my first
God.
4 turns of the game were sing Let the Storm Rage On and kill your banish is the Disney lore kind of term. Banish your
come on, Dave.
Banish your character. So they didn't have a good time against this particular version of the deck, which is like speaks to the value of Let the Storm Rage On. And Bumi, you would say you should play Bella and Let the Storm Rage On and just collect your free wins when they're available to you. And
it's the same reason you play 4 copies of Cinderella and 4 copies of Let the Storm Rage On in that color combo.
Yeah,
just scoop up wins when it's presented to you.
Yeah, and to round out the cards that are probably just too good, with these 2-cost ramp spells, we spoke about them already, but they just really streamline the deck and smooth it out, particularly Sail the Azurite Sea being able to combo with another 1-cost item on turn 2 when you put it into play. I had a turn where I went a game where I played a Popsicle on turn 1, a Sail and a Popsicle on turn 2, a Fishbone Quill and a Popsicle and a Scrooge and a Bell on turn 3. And so I ended my 3rd turn with 2 characters in play, a Fishbone Quill and up on ink. Up 1 card on ink.
And
down almost no cards.
Yeah, and of course I had 1 or 2 cards left in my hand at that point in time, but one of them was the Flaversham, and from there Fishbone Quill just kind of took over and got to do the thing.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
blue and steel cards together.
Yeah, so I have it listed here for a reason to play this deck, just not having Let the Storm Rage On targets. If I jump back to the builds that we were playing, the only thing that can be directly banished by Let the Storm Rage On in both of our decks is Tipo.
Yeah,
and
he's already done his thing when that happens.
Yeah, you're not playing him to do anything other than to ramp to 4 on turn 2. Otherwise, he's just ink. So if that's what happens, if that's what your opponent is using Let the Storm Rage On to banish, that's completely okay. And if I jump back to the slide with all of the 2-drops for your other options, we both, Justin, I think, played 1 blue steel Oswald player.
Yep. Yeah.
And
demolished him.
Yeah, it was quite an easy 2-0 on my side as well. Just because the deck, the way we built our deck was to go 1-2-4 and win the board immediately with singers. And our Bell can sing removal spells on their characters, whereas their Bell, their Let the Storm Rage On don't do anything on the way back. And so when your opponent plays Bell and you play Bell and then they play Oswald, you're just miles ahead because you have the Let the Storm Rage On. And the deck, when you play Oswald, is jammed up on Uninkable, so it's not like they have the option to not play Oswald and pass. And even if they choose to do that, then their next turn would be Fishbone Quill, and your turn would be Scrooge.
Yep.
And so from that point forward, you've already won the board. And another thing that Scrooge does as a 4/4 battler is he combines with Let the Storm Rage On to take out Flaversham.
Yep.
So one of the things that I was finding in my blue steel mirrors is that my Flavershams were more or less invincible, and my opponent's Flavershams would quest 1 time and then get banished.
Yeah.
Yep.
Scrooge is definitely a card that I didn't understand how powerful he was going to be. And then we built kind of the entire deck around him.
Yeah. And I think this is probably a good time to talk about Fishbone Quill and why it's in the deck. Because when people look at the list, the most common question I've been asked when people have reached out to me to talk about the deck list is why I would choose to play a Fishbone blue steel list? And the answer is I'm not really. Fishbone Quill is mostly just an inkable that you can grab with Scrooge.
Yep.
And an inkable that you can banish with, or an item that you can banish with Flaversham, and plan B when you miss your ramp. And it's quite a powerful plan B. Fishbone Quill is a very strong card.
Mm-hmm.
It can get you to this big Tamatoa on turn 4, which is way ahead of schedule. It can get you to the even larger Tamatoa. I played a turn 5 8-cost Tamatoa against a purple steel opponent.
That's pretty good.
Feels
Seems
good when you do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with the last bullet I put here, right, is that when you play this 1-2-4 game plan, you win the board, and then you kind of just want to stall the game out until the value engine of the Tamatoas and Flavershams take over, and then you can win in very combo-y turns that go for 10 to 16 lore between a dime and large the So Shiny Tamatoa, the 8-cost one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Justin?
So I think that's most of the game plan. I would say another common question. I think actually we have other common questions to talk about, right? So maybe I'll wait for now. Oh no. Okay, so I'll talk about this one before we move on. In fact, is what do we do on 5 ink, right? And because if you look at the deck, there is no 5-drop in the deck. Not a single 5-drop exists in this deck. And part of that is, we had this conversation. We're like looking at the cards that exist, and I'm like, what are we doing in our 5-drop slot? There's nothing here. And I say that as a longtime blue steel player. Like, obviously longtime blue steel players will be like, there's Cogsworth, there's all these like hard-headed beasts, like there's things that exist in that slot, but they're not the same power level as the rest of this deck. They're definitely a step down.
Pretty below rate compared to what else is in here.
Yep. And so what we generally find for that turn 5 or that 5th ink turn, right, is like maybe we went Scrooge first and then we do Flaversham plus a popsicle. Maybe we're doing another like Tipo turn or Sail the Azra's Heat turn. Maybe we're just playing a bunch of popsicles and getting the engine going, sort of thing, right? Like,
right.
So the deck is definitely like, we have 1, 2, 4, very planned out. That's what we want to do every game. And then from there, it evolves into a much more flexible game plan. Which is interesting as a blue steel player, because as like in the traditional builds, you had Popsicle on turn 1, Smee on turn 2, Fishbone Quill on turn 3, turn 4 you play your Tinkerbell, turn 5 you've seen your whole new world, right? And so it used to be this thing of like, you had at least 5 turns planned out for you, and then things start falling off the rails and you have to start getting a little creative with it. For us, that happens a couple of turns sooner.
Yeah. What's neat with this style of deck too is that even though you don't have something like a definitive something to do on 5 ink, you can just kind of do the best thing that your cards allow, which might be, you can play out a bunch of items and redraw. And because you have Bell and Scrooge, that doesn't mean you're not committing to the board, right? You're not spending a whole turn dirtling, just like, okay, like pop, Fortisphere, on your 5 ink turn, like play like a Tipo or a Sail, whatever. And it's like, oh, okay. And now that I've done that, let me exert these 4 items to play this Scrooge for free, get a redraw. All right, now let me banish one of these popsicles that I exerted to play Scrooge for free, to play Bell for free. Okay, go. I have 7 strength, 7 willpower, and 2 lore and play. Plus I churned through 5 cards in my deck or whatever.
Yeah.
I think my most so I don't know those I played mostly steel matchups where my Flavershams were surviving, like if I played them early. So my most, I would play Flaversham on turn, I guess 3. So turn 4, the 5 ink turn was probably Quill Pete very often for me. So when I say Quill was mostly ink, the times that I played it most often were when I was resource rich because my Flaversham quested once, and I could drop a Fishbone Quill into play and really turbocharge the deck. But it's not the line of play that I'm actively going for, and it's really dependent on Flaversham surviving. But it was really common to go turn 3 Flaversham, turn 4 Fishbone Quill, and Pete.
Yeah, I can see that
and
too.
And kind of turbocharge the deck. We'll talk about Fire the Cannons in a second in the Q&A section, but one card I wanted to give some attention to is Hades, which I think is another card that mostly only the two of us were playing before this weekend. It's not showing up in a lot of other blue steel lists. It certainly was the card that really propelled this deck forward and allowed you to win grindy mirrors rather than executing the game plan that we said where you kind of race out to an early lead. Hades allowed you to get one more turn by answering a clean answer to the big Tamatoa that your opponent would try and sneak into play and then combo finish you with. That happened quite a few times in my testing where it's particularly in games where I was on the draw, my opponent would play the big Tamatoa thinking that I would have no way to answer it. And then I had Hades to cleanly take care of it. It also answers, opposing 6-cost Tamatoas, opposing Maui Half Sharks, that kind of stuff.
Chernabog.
Oh yeah, it answers Chernabogs in the
Chernadog deck.
In the Chernadog Amber Emerald deck.
Yes. Yeah.
Which can be a very tough card to answer. Hades was very good. I would definitely keep 2 in the deck. Back to the questions and answers. You're our resident blue steel expert, Justin.
Yeah. So what about those cards right there? Yeah.
What about all the old school cards?
What about all the old school cards? So, all right. Smee and Cogsworth. So let's just talk about Smee separate from the other 3 cards here for a moment. So Mr. Smee, as we've talked about before, like the other 2, we chose the other 2 drops, right? For a variety of reasons. But another reason is just like we wanted to max out the effectiveness of Scrooge. And so to do that, we played the ramp spells. On the flip side of that, because we were playing Scrooge, we knew how weak a 2-cost 3/3 was in like against our own deck. And so we were concerned, like Smee just doesn't line up as well in a world full of Scrooge. So that was one thing. Then you get into the other 3 cards here. And so, all right, your traditional play lines with blue steel looked like Cogs. You play your 1 drop out item, you play your Smee on 2, you play your Fishbone Quill, you get your Cogsworth down if you think you need it. Then you get down your Tinkerbell, you scene grab your swords, you deal 3 damage to the board, right? What is 3 damage killing these days? Bell, okay, kind of nice.
Not Scrooge. Not Flaversham.
Not Flaversham.
Neither Tamatoa.
Neither Tamatoa, not Daisy.
None of the cards in the Amber Steel deck.
Oh, the answer is the purple cards, right?
Right, it's all the purple cards. And where have all the purple cards
already unplayable in the face of 1-cost 3/3?
Exactly. And so I don't think that Tinkerbell and Grab Your Swords and Cogsworth are completely irrelevant cards.
Yeah.
Like I think they will see play again at some point in time. But knowing that purple cards are basically gone right now. Now I say that having lost to Blurple in the semifinals. But for the most part, that was the only purple I saw. Besides like purple steel, right? And purple steel just gets obliterated by the other things that our deck is doing anyways. So like these cards just aren't doing enough. Like Tinkerbell is kind of slow. Cogsworth is very slow. So when you're running, when your game plan is to ramp to Tamatoa and play Dime and do all those things, you actually don't care about Cogsworth anymore, right? Because
Right.
all it's doing is saying, here, give my characters resist +1 so I can battle for the board better. Well, we're already playing overstatted characters. They don't need resist to battle for the board better. So instead, what we want to do is find a way to end the game. And we do that by playing these bigger Tamatoa cards and payoffs. Or we play like actual removal, like Hades and Zeus and stuff like that. And so that's where Tinkerbell, Grab Your Sword, Cogsworth all sort of disappear in the face of the fact that we have this other useful single target removal. We're not giving up a board early. We're not playing Fishbone Quill on turn 3 as our sort of plan A. So we're not skipping turn 3 anymore. And so all that comes together to say, yeah, maybe we don't need Cogsworth, we don't need Tinkerbell, we don't need Grab Your Swords for this deck.
Right. And a lot of people, you watch coverage, you talk to Blue Steel players. They're like, oh, you don't ever exert Cogsworth. Like, the only time you exert Cogsworth is when they have nothing on board. You don't ever exert, like they play him like he's an item, and you can't play a 5-cost item in this format.
No, not unless you're playing it for free.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you some questions about SME that I already know the answer to, but maybe the people watching don't.
Okay.
So one thing that you see, or one question that I've seen a lot, in various forums is, well, without SME, how do you beat red blue? How do you push lore fast enough, to be able to beat red blue? Because in sets past, the goal was get to 10, play Ariel and Dime, and 10, and 10 them that turn.
Yeah.
So how do you beat red blue if you're not pushing fast lore with cards like Mr. Smee in this deck?
My response to that has been, I just grind them down. So the deck draws so many cards, and I think it will surprise people until they actually play the deck how many cards it actually draws. One of the things that we noticed in testing, for example, we were playing against a red-blue player, and at the end of the game, I consistently had less cards in my deck than they did in theirs. And I don't have workshop in this build, right? It's not like I'm depending on playing popsicles in the workshops. No. I'm just playing my popsicles, recurring my popsicles, using Fluttersham, using Scrooge, using the Tamatoas. And so really what it came down to was like, yeah, you get some incremental lore from the Bell, from the Tipo, from the Scrooge in the early game. Like, and you're going to consistently get some amount of lore from that. But realistically, what it really came down to was just like, all right, every turn after turn 5, like from turn 5 on, I'm just going to play something that red blue has to answer that's going to grind them to dust with the amount of cards that I'm drawing in comparison to them.
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, Bell, Tipo, and Scrooge also gain quite a fair bit of lore against red blue. And another thing that both Bell and Scrooge did in the red blue matchup that kind of flips it in blue steel's favor is that there was this dynamic before where the high rims that blue steel played were banished almost instantly, and the high rims that blue red played would live forever. And that doesn't happen anymore in the face of a bunch of 3/3s and 4/4s.
Right.
So the high rims are certainly more resilient on the red blue side, but they're no longer immortal.
Yeah.
And the blue steel engine is just so consistent. There's so many more cantrips. Not just in the 4 additional Fortis spheres, but also in Let the Storm Rage On. It's certainly not a good card in the matchup, but it does combine with Scrooge to take out Harem Flaversham. You can put 2 of them together to take out a Sisu or a Medusa. It finishes off a Maui that hit, that crashed into a Bell.
Clears a small Sisu for free effectively.
And takes out small Sisus. And so you just spin through your deck much faster. Now, if red blue draws the correct half of their deck, and they have multiple popsicles as well, yeah, it's still a very challenging matchup. Whereas like the Oswald builds of the deck are definitely favored into red blue. So you do lose a little bit of consistency against red blue. The matchup certainly is worse than if you had Oswald or Chicha in your deck. But the benefit into the blue steel mirror and into the other decks in the format is just well worth it in my opinion. And I still feel like red blue is quite favorable for this deck.
Yeah.
Especially if they're on DKP style shark versions that rely on playing a lot of actions.
Yeah.
Pete, and if they're not on coils to use character based interaction to deal with the Tamatoas, a Tamatoa and Pete on 9 ink is just like game winning.
Yep. Yeah. You also have Long Came Zeus to clear the sharks very cleanly.
Yep.
You can build a board of characters to clear the sharks with Strength of a Raging Fire. You have 7 power or 7 strength worth of characters, that are effectively free to rumble into manners. Everything in this blue steel deck kind of lines up really nicely with what the DKP builds are attempting to do.
Yep. Justin, you want to talk about your favorite card, Fire the Cannons?
Fire the Cannons. So sometimes you just need to deal 2, and sometimes you want to do it for cheap. Okay, we went back and forth on Fire the Cannons for a long time, right? And I was very insistent that we had to have Fire the Cannons, in part because I was insistent that we needed to respect what we expected to be some of the other top players at the tournament, knowing that some of the other top players at the tournament are people that love playing Diablo. And this deck actually really does have a Diablo problem if you're not on Fire the Cannons, because all the removal that you would want to use on Diablo is song-based. So if they Ursula 2 and hit your Let the Storm Rage on, and that was your only response for an early Diablo, they run away with card advantage over the game, and you have no response for it. And so I was insistent that we had to have Fire the Cannons just because we had to respect the play level of specific players at the tournament, quite frankly. I don't think that was incorrect, despite the fact that neither you nor I actually played against it. It turns out Fire the Cannons is still just a good card. You can fire the cannons on Oswald. You can fire the cannons on any of the random vanish characters, right? Like sometimes I was being silly, but sometimes you really do just want to deal 2 extra damage to something, right? Like you combine it with a Storm Rage on to get rid of a big Sisu. All these sorts of things. It's what, Harlan would refer to as the steel maths. And you get used to dealing with the steel maths as you go. And as you learn to play blue steel a little bit more. But when you first come into playing blue steel, like if that's not a color combo that you're used to playing, it really looks like you don't need that card and it's not worth the uninkable slot. And I promise that it is worth the uninkable slot to have the card there for any sort of ramp style deck.
Yeah, I was very down on Fire the Cannons, but ultimately this was like a trust the people you're working with situation. I'm longtime red player, or not red purple player. Dabbled with red blue, have never touched blue steel cards before. You're the expert. You've made DLC day 2s multiple times with blue steel. I was willing to trust your judgment. I didn't play any green decks, so like the Fire the Cannons wasn't there for Diablos, but it did kill an Oswald on my turn 2. Banished in Oswald. Sorry, Disney. It banished in Oswald. I got to play Sail into Fire the Cannons to take out the Oswald on the draw, and that felt very powerful. The way I feel about Fire the Cannons now is kind of like taking an antibiotic when you're sick. It makes you feel worse in the moment, but you feel better in the long run. Whereas if you don't do that and you just get sicker. Right, it's like at the moment I take the Fire of the Cannons out of the deck, the birds
The birds
come and
flock
get
to
me.
you. Yeah.
Right. Like the Diablos just show up on your front door and like stare at you and they're like, when I draw, we draw.
We draw.
We
And
draw.
so like I wasn't thrilled to have it in the deck, but I recognized that it was it's you have it when you need it, and I never needed it, but I was glad I had it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
when we get to slide 6, but I did cut one, fire the cannons in the updated version of the deck, mostly because I think green steel kind of got swallowed up by everything else.
Yeah.
And so like I feel like the birds
Yeah.
would be in hiding. So can you cut any card for any other card?
I mean, the
Your
answer to
favorite
that
card, your favorite blue
question,
steel card.
the answer to that question is always, of course, yes, you
Yes.
could. So my perspective on this is actually like I come at it from a percentages perspective, right? Like if I take out Tipo and I put in Mr. Smee, I have made my game plan less consistent. I have sort of muddied the waters on what I want to do there. But there will be times where that Mr. Smee will just actually be a better card, right? Like in the later game, I draw Mr. Smee, and instead of saying, this probably goes in my inkwell, I say, oh, look, I got a 3/3 that quests for 2. So yes, of course, you can always cut X card to insert whatever it is you want. I don't recommend it. I think our deck is actually, it's got some spots where you can change around tech cards in it. And I'm sure it'll evolve to trying to account for changes in the metagame. But I think the deck, as it was built, was really designed to take advantage of all the very powerful cards. And if you start swapping out different pieces of that, at least without knowing what you're like, why you're swapping them, you're gonna throw the balance of how the deck is meant to be played off.
Yeah, what I would say is you can of course cut cards and swap any cards you want. I would just encourage everybody to play the deck for 20 games before you swap stuff around, and then make minor changes as you feel fit. If you think you can improve it or make it better for your local metagame, of course.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Another way to approach this question is, you get a question, why aren't you playing this card? Or, oh, could I swap this card for that? Ask yourself, what are you trying to do with that card? Are you trying to increase your percentage points in a certain matchup? How are the percentage points? Do you think that matchup's not good enough? Like adding this card will improve that matchup. Do you think it'll make the engine run smoother? Do you think it'll give you an answer to something you currently don't have an answer for? If your answer to can I cut, a card that I don't like for a card that I have a personal fondness for, the answer to that question is, go ahead, play the cards you want.
Yeah, I'm not going to stop you.
The competitive answer to that question is no, don't do that. Like, don't mess with something just to play, your pet cards. Mm-hmm. And I'm guilty of that. Like I'm cutting tried and tested cards to fit reindeers and cheetahs in my deck.
Has fun.
Oh, spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. That was my favorite slide. Oh well, I clicked it around, but
all right. Does this deck have any bad matchups?
Yes, it does.
Are you going to share them with us?
Uh-oh. I buried the lead here, but we'll talk about briefly the two decks that beat us in the event and eliminated us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I lost in top 8 to Richie Chang. He was the eventual winner with what I believe to be a near perfectly built Steel Song set 7 deck list. Cut all of the piglets and stuff that for the Troubadour, a bunch of Rapunzel traps everywhere. The Troubadour, Daisy Duck,
the Troubadour,
Troubadour.
Lawrence, Gantu, Miss Bianca. She is huge, very hard to get off the table.
Yeah.
anti-item technology, both in I Find Them in Platinum and in Gantu. I felt like I was going to win game one quite handily, and my opponent found the one of Gantu, got it into play when my hand was like 3 items and a Scrooge, and instead of playing all 3 items and my Scrooge, I played a single item in the turn that followed.
What's kind of crazy is Steel Song had like no major upgrades since like that set 3 and before is like where almost all of the Steel Song cards come from.
Yes.
And then you got Vanessa in set 4, and in set 5 you got Daisy, and if you want to play Naveen, you can play Naveen, and then of course we got Pete. And then set 6 there's very little, and then set 7 you're looking at the Amber and Steel cards. It's like, okay, there's not a whole lot here. But in practice, Miss Bianca and the Troubadour are just incredible cards. They're just extremely good, especially in this blue steel heavy meta.
Yeah, I've only played 3 games, right? So I played the 3 games against Richie. I haven't gone back and tested against this list. It felt play draw dependent, but it also felt like the first person that sang a removal spell that banished something won the game. And that's where the Troubadour was excellent, being able to sing Along Came Zeus. And the Troubadour was better than Vanessa would be in that spot, because what I was looking to do on the blue steel side was go Bell, Tipo, Scrooge.
Right.
And Bell plus Tipo does banish Vanessa, but does not banish the Troubadour. And he still is a Rapunzel target for 2. It's not the 3 that Vanessa, is going to pick up.
Rapunzel for 2, still very
Rapunzel
good.
For 2 into removal spells was still very good. Richie Chang played great. Well deserving victory on his end. I think he got some pretty nice artwork. I think if I remember from the social media picture, he walked away with the Tamatoa artwork, I think.
Yeah.
He got the Baymax.
The Baymax artwork, also very nice. So well built. I would. I'm not an Amber Steel player, but if I were to pick it up, I would play this 60 without changing a card. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
To know.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of Amber Steel going in that direction with Miss Bianca's, big, basically, big butt that deck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I will say this: this version of Amber Steel that you ran into, Dave, is significantly harder for our deck than the version of Amber Steel that I ran into in quarterfinals.
Yes.
Which was like a diggy hole. Oh, hello. So I ran into diggy hole in my quarters and absolutely demolished it.
Yeah, I would feel quite confident into that version.
Yeah.
If Let the Storm Rage On is a good card in the matchup. Another thing Richie did was ink Cindy turn 1 and pass, which I think shows like
that is an extremely high level play, and
shows a lot of restraint. So well played by him. It was nice to meet him for the first time. He played really well. Moving over to the Blurple deck by the mad scientist Larry, longtime Blurple player in the area. So this is what got you, Justin, in the quarters. It was a top deck Hades that took out a bodyguarded character to allow him to banish your Ariel. That kind of sealed the deal.
Mm-hmm.
What is interesting about this list is that Larry took 4 popsicles and 4 bells and thought it was good enough to shove it in Blurple.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. You start Blurple's biggest problem, was that it was, if it lost the board, it had no real way to get it back because a lot of its interaction was quite cumbersome. There were 7 and 8 cost on Inkables, and Bell and Popsicle turn 1 into a Bell, wins the board on turn 1. the interesting thing about those two cards in Blurple is that Blurple is a very ink hungry deck. And so if your opening hand has the combo in it, you can play it. And if it doesn't, you just ink the halves of the combo and play the normal Blurple game.
Yep.
And just move past it immediately, which is
brilliant.
A brilliant innovation. I learned in this event at the coffee shop. So I ID'd with Larry in round 5. He's a friend of mine who plays at my local store. When both of us, the one set championships per set that we play in, we battle it out. I did not know that Bell Accomplished Mystic had shift.
Yep.
That is text. That is text she has.
Yep.
He was kind enough to give away that secret to me. Ahead of the top 8. Kind of funny. But yeah, it shifts for so Bell Accomplished Mystic, 5 cost 4/4, quest for 2, shifts for 3. And when it comes into play, you can move 2 damage. So you can upgrade your 3/3 to a 4/4 quest for 2. And move 2 damage when the time is right, which could be quite strong.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, the only other set 7 card in the list is the Queen, Jealous Beauty. That's the legendary 4/3.
Yeah.
Larry, I think after the fact, was pretty unimpressed and probably would take the 2 copies of the Queen and put them into Sail the Azurite Sea and the Goat. But worth a try. Certainly a very interesting list.
Pretty low opportunity cost of trying out an inkable card.
Yeah.
That can close the game out very quickly.
Yeah, one interesting thing about the set 7 format that we're in is that we're kind of in this like blue steel metagame, and everybody is going to X-Force, like low strength, high willpower characters to try and set Rapunzel traps. So our event also had a yellow-green. The other semifinalist was a yellow-green Rapunzel trap deck. And Larry ran through all of those because Fox and Madam M. Fox and Merlin Crab are quite strong in 2 things that can't fight back.
Yeah.
And so there's this like interesting kind of rock, paper, scissors going on between decks. There's between blue steel decks trying to beat blue steel, and then the purple decks that are kind of taking advantage of Fox and Crab to feast on those.
Yep. Yeah.
Anything else on these 2?
Larry's deck was very interesting. I greatly enjoyed playing against it. Kind of goofed up my own play, but he played very well, and the deck was a lot of fun to see in action.
Yeah.
I imagine you didn't test a whole lot into set 7 Blurple in preparation for the test or for the event.
Well, neither of these decks we tested into. Multiple times I asked Dave and be like, "Do we need to worry about Amber Steel?" And he'd be like, "Nah, man, that deck's not real."
Less words.
I gave Dave a false sense of confidence by putting together a bad Amber Steel list and letting him 7-0 me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A funny conversation I had with Larry after the fact. I asked him about the 2 queens, and how he or the Merlin, the 3 Merlin, the 3 Sail, and the 2 queens, and how he chose to cut Sail the Azurite Sea and Merlin, which we think are pretty high powered cards. And he said he needed to get down to 61 cards. 63 was too many, but you needed that one of Cusco in there, which I think probably scared you off of playing the diamond hat.
That was the misplay that I made. I should have just forced him to have it, but that's the way tournaments go sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Last slide on blue steel stuff, and then we move into some fun ones. The update following the InkInc Invitational. So this is one card different from each of the lists that we had submitted, so they're kind of moving together. We got the 4th Pete back in there. For my list, I moved a Fishbone Quill to a Greatstone Dragon. and then went to 2, along came Zeus, and moved to fire the cannons. Whereas from your list, it was like Ariel to Pete, and then fire the cannons to the Great Stone Dragon.
Yep.
You want to talk about Great Stone Dragon briefly?
Yeah, Great Stone Dragon is so I refuse to play bad items just to make Scrooge hit more items more often. And it turns out that Great Stone Dragon is an item that Scrooge can hit that is inkable, so it hits that criteria. But it also manages to dodge the what I would say is a bad item criteria. So there are times where you want a Great Stone Dragon into like the grindier blue matchups, and if you Great Stone Dragon and they don't, you just take over the game. You stop inking cards from hand, you still keep up on resources, and you're able to just keep up in card advantage because of that. So it just generates so much advantage throughout the rest of the game once it's in play.
Yeah, I think it's the best inkable item you can put into play for free. Which is it was the necessary criteria, right? Is that it for us was that it was inkable so that Scrooge could find it, and then it was situationally very high powered, but for the most part, we were just inking it.
Yeah.
One I don't have it here, but one thought I would have, if the Amber Steel deck that Richie played continues to grow in popularity, and you need to pivot this deck list to try and combat that, I would be looking at ward cards like Ariel to do that. Like I said, Alice, not Ariel. The 3-cost Alice that gives other cards word.
Yeah.
Cogsworth kind of fits in that vein too, but what the point I made earlier about kind of the first person to sing a removal spell kind of wins the board and never loses it. One way to break that parity is with the ward characters. So something like Alice Pluto would be pretty good.
Alice would be very good into it. Jim Hawkins is another option.
Yeah, Jim Hawkins on turn 2 would be interesting.
Yeah.
So we have some options to deal with Amber Steel. We were just completely ignoring the matchup when we built the deck because of its perceived lack of metagame share.
Yep. All right. With that, I think all three of us would think that Blue Steel and Sapphire in general probably are a touch overpowered. So I made some fun mock-ups for...
Just a little bit.
Made some fun mock-ups for... I wouldn't suggest making all of these changes, but some fun ways to kind of depower Blue Steel and Sapphire in general. My first and my favorite one, and all images here are courtesy of Lorcana Villain, would be to take Fortisphere and Sapphire and errata them to Amber.
That might make them unplayable. Amber, so if you make these cards Amber, which they could be because these are core mechanics of Amber, they just don't get to do it as well as other colors. You could make like the blue-yellow items deck that still has all of these busted blue cards in it, but you don't get a way to interact meaningfully. So like, okay, yeah, you can play overstated characters, you can play, Hiram and draw infinite cards, but like you're never ever clearing a Diablo from the other side of the table.
Yes, that's the trade-off.
And I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Amber.
But that's probably the worst. That's probably the worst fate a good card could suffer.
It's better to be banned than get color shifted into Amber. But think of how fun Rapunzel traps would be with Belle and Scrooge. You could play Hiram and Belle, or Hiram and Scrooge and Rapunzel in the same deck.
Yeah, I could draw a million cards and never, ever, ever, ever beat Diablo.
Yeah, that's the price you pay. Outside of Let It Go and Hades, is there even an answer in these two colors to a single Diablo? I guess you could. You could play support characters and World's Greatest Criminal Mind / Mini.
You could do that. You could sleeve up Launch.
You could sleeve up Launch. Sapphire also has why can't I think of the word? it has the cards that have evasive on your turn on it.
Ah, yeah, you could
yeah,
play
you could
Cruella de
play
Vil.
Cruella de
you could play
Vil,
set one Robin
Hood,
Hood, set one
Flint,
staple Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Flintheart, Glomgold, or something like that. Like there's a number of
Yeah,
them.
something.
So Sapphire does have
All right.
responses if it really needed them.
Fun.
Yeah, that would be
And
that would be pretty funny.
yeah, the fun thing is like Amber already has like 16 or 18 or whatever items that heal things, and they're all terrible. Like Popsicle, if it were Amber, would be the absolute best healing item in the color, and it still probably wouldn't be playable because you can't do anything with it.
Yeah, so the next one, in my opinion, the biggest design mistake they ever, well, Bucky's probably the biggest design mistake they ever made, but the second biggest one that really has warped Sapphire to like the best color in the game is making these 2-cost uninkable cards that are also they're resources, and Sail the Azurite Sea is particularly offensive because it's not even like you just flow through it in the late game when you draw it because it draws a card. So Tipo goes to uninkable because I don't think you should be able to play an inkable card that solves your uninkable problems. So like if we look at Hidden Inkcaster in Emerald, it's uninkable, and so like there's this risk reward of putting it into your deck, whereas like Tipo, when it was printed, allowed Ruby Sapphire to play 22 uninkables in their 3D control decks, because Tipo could solve all your problems and ink it.
Good lord, dude.
And so the only change made to him is to make him uninkable. Sail, I turned into a completely different card.
Yeah. Sail as it is, I think is just like so beyond what a card that costs 2 should do.
Yes, I agree.
Right? Like it's inkable, it's a redraw, and you get to have an unexerted ink to like play another item or do whatever with. Like look at Sail the Azurite Sea and then go look at Lantern.
Yeah, no, I get it. So we got rid of the card draw. We made it uninkable, and it just says put this card into your ink wall face down and exerted.
Yeah.
So there's a trade-off, right, with one jump ahead. They're more or less the same card. One jump ahead is a song, so you could Bell. Well, not with this. With Bell in its current state, right? You could sing it. That also can be a downside because Ursula can interact with it. But you would choose between whether or not you wanted the explosiveness of being able to play, like, say, a Tipo or a 2-cost character, like a Gaston or something, and be able to sing one jump ahead versus just having this card that is an actual brick if you draw it, beyond turn 2.
Right.
All right. What do we got next? The next one is Belle, our favorite apprentice inventor. Everything's the same except she has the voice. Well, the Lorcana villain Baker, he called it overworked, but the character cannot exert to sing songs. So the voiceless clause from the set 1 Ariel.
That would fix a lot of things, I think.
Yeah.
I think it would still be problematic to have a character that just like wins the board against everything else that can be played in the first 2 turns. But this getting to sing Let the Storm Rage On and Strength of a Raging Fire for how little it costs and how big it is really, really has warped the format in a way that we're seeing all X4s decks in all of the Amber decks that are succeeding are X4 decks. And we're going to talk about it in a minute, but that's really Let the Storm Rage On's fault.
Yeah. Only Amber's allowed to have singers for broken songs, right?
Well, yeah. Let the Storm Rage On Eiffel deck building, and for a long time.
Yeah. Tamatoa is now costing 8, which seems kind of lame because the other Tamatoa also cost 8, but you can't just turn every card uninkable as a balanced mechanic, right?
No.
But even at 8, this one might just still be better.
How many 3-for-1s are there at inkable 8 cost in the game? Right, Dragon's just like a 2-for-1, cost 9.
Yeah.
Doesn't generate up to 7 ink when it quests.
Yeah, I think the combination of 6-cost Tamatoa being able to play Lucky Dime for free and an 8-cost Tamatoa,
being what it is,
and just it's really just this like enchantment that from Magic that you put into play that's like gain 7 lore with Lucky Dime, like if you assemble the 2-card combo. And at least if you made them both cost 8, the player would have to make a conscious effort and choose which. You can't play 8 cost clunky value engines in your deck.
One thing that could also balance this Tamatoa is if the item that he played came in exerted.
Yes.
Or if there was a cap on how much ink he can generate for free.
Yeah,
3 or less.
Tim Hawkins.
Or if it were an exert ability. Like this card is so overtuned. Like there are so many dials that like they could have put on him to just tone him down a little bit, and he would still be like an S tier card. He could have got 1 item back. He could have, they could have had the courtesy to make him a 5 strength, a 5/4, so he dies to Fox, or he gets banished to Fox and World's Greatest Criminal Mind.
Mm-hmm.
They could have made you have to choose between getting lore and putting items into free. They could have made it so you can only put a 2-cost item into play for free, which is still okay.
Yeah, this card is particularly funny next to the Ruby Legendary Blue from set 7.
A 5/4/2 without a text box.
Which is just a 5/4/2. Yeah, 5/4/2 uninkable that protects 3 cards in the entire game.
Yeah.
And that one's uninkable, but Tamatoa, you can ink him on turn 1.
There's only, as far as I'm aware, there's only one way to have that Baloo's ability active on your opponent's turn. Do you know what it is?
2 Lumieres.
2 Lumieres.
It didn't even occur to me that it's not active on your own turn. Oh my gosh.
On your opponent's turn. There's a lot of buff strength on your turn that'll turn them on, but the only way to do it on your opponent's turn is 2 Lumieres. Or I guess you could put them into Cove and have Lumiere as well.
Yeah.
All right, Lucky Dime.
Next, I got Lucky Dime. But I actually don't like this one, and it's my least. It's like a pretty inelegant one. I don't even know how to put it there. But just changing Lucky Dime so it's like only the printed lore pips.
Yeah.
So like quite good with the Sisus, the new Bell, Gantu, and not just ending. It prevents you from it prevents you or your opponent from going 0 to 20 or 4 to 20 in a single turn with Tamatoa.
Yeah. So would it be more acceptable to someone if this item came in exerted, right? Like not even put the clause on the other Tamatoa, but put the clause on Lucky Dime itself and say this item.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too.
That'd be fine. Yeah. Because right now, we play games where it's like, okay, I am just setting up this, this turn where I'm going to put a dime and a Tamatoa into play in the same turn and gain 10, and that'll be the game.
Mm-hmm.
And the counterplay to that is win before they can do it.
Right.
And that's not always easy.
Just wait for it.
The last Sapphire card that I've had a major beef with, basically since I started playing the game, has been Fishbone Quill.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I think Fishbone Quill and Sail are both a problem because for whatever reason those two cards don't put the card. They come in readied instead of exerted.
Right.
And so like a simple change to this one would just be.
Yeah. So I think in formats past Fishbone Quill, when Fishbone Quill was really strong, I think it could have been fixed by saying you just get to ink another card this turn, like Sail does.
Yeah.
So like you do the ink action again because that means it has to be an inkable card and you have to reveal it. But this was another thing, you know, along with Tipo, where you could play 24 uninkables in your blue-red deck and you just play Quill on 3 and you don't have to think about, you know, you don't have a bricked hand anymore. You get to ink every turn. Sometimes you get to ink twice a turn. You just get to play the game as if you didn't, you know, put 24 uninkables in your deck. Now, I mean, with Sail, that put a tremendous pressure on these decks to play fewer uninkables anyway. And Quill is not. I think Quill is not as prominent or as good as it was, but I think it should have just put cards in face down exerted.
Yeah. I would love to see the number of Fishbone Quills in top 8 deck lists over time and figure out what happened in set 5 or set 6 when Sail the Azurite Sea got printed.
Yeah.
And you just got an even better ramps, you know, ramp action.
Yeah. Like Quill at least has like the downside of needing like Hiram Flaversham or a Whole New World.
Yeah.
To not run yourself out of cards extremely quickly, but when it's humming along, it's just like the best card in the game.
Yeah, particularly punishing to the Ruby Amethysts of the world that can't interact with items.
Yeah.
You just get insurmountable advantage with a draw engine.
Yeah.
All right. I will.
All right.
I got some jokes on the screen. So our good friend LD Lorcana Decklist in Discord had said that Let the Storm Rage On is probably the best card in the game, and then submitted an LCC decklist with only 3 of them in the list, which I thought was pretty funny. I've been giving him a hard time about that for a bit. Bumi, you wanted to talk about everybody's favorite 3-cost removal.
So this card is so problematic, and it's been problematic since set 2 when it came out, and like people, I think right now it's getting the ire that it has deserved for year and a half, almost 18 months now. This card has stifled deck building, I think, more than almost any other card in the game. Because if your opponent plays Cinderella on turn 1 and you're on the draw, like your options are play a 1/3 or ink pass or lose the game on the spot by challenging them to not have it. And you can't put cards in your deck, like, because Let the Storm Rage On exists, you can't put cards in your deck that have 2 willpower, that cost 3. Like, you can't play any 3-cost 2 willpower card that doesn't like have a powerful effect. I know Maleficent Sorceress saw play, but she at least replaced herself. Like, you can't put a card that costs 3 or more that's gonna get banished to Let the Storm Rage On without doing something. Like, you'll just lose the game. They play a free removal spell. Now you have Belle, which is a Cinderella with 3 more points of stats. She's a 3/3. She can sing Let the Storm Rage On. You really can't play a anything into Belle, because like you can't play anything into Belle and plan to turn her sideways. But like you can't play a 2 willpower thing into Belle because she's just gonna get got. And you can't have a plan where you're I'm gonna play like a Cinderella on turn 2, or I'm gonna play a Cinderella on turn 1. They're gonna play a Belle. I'm gonna play a Smee. I'll let them Storm Rage on my Cinderella, and then I'll challenge your Belle. Like like you can't do that. Like at least with Cinderella, you could say, okay, I don't have the Storm Rage on. Like I'm gonna play my Cinderella. If they don't respect it and they play their own Cinderella, at least I can play a Smee or something that can challenge her on the way back, and you're not going to lose that character. But you can't do that with Belle. Like and that people, I don't like, I keep seeing things like this, like, oh, we're cutting Let the Storm Rage Ons, there's no targets for it, there's no, it's not killing anything, it's not banishing anything, it's not getting its value. It's like that's not true at all, right? Like it's a 0 cost 2 damage draw card. It replaces itself. At least like in Amber Steel, if they're exerting a Cinderella, she's vulnerable and isn't going to trade back with anything. But like if you're just exerting a Belle to get this uninkable card out of your hand, like anything they rumble in with is gonna take 3 more. You can let the Storm Rage on their Scrooge, and if they want to challenge in, okay, you trade it up on cards, and or you trade it up on ink, and you're even on cards because Let the Storm Rage on replaced itself, and their Scrooge replaced itself. You just don't care.
Yep.
But also, you talked a bit about challenging Hiram Faversham with Scrooge, and then finishing him off with Let the Storm Rage on. Like, Hiram Faversham was unkillable, and now you just get to like challenge him for 4 and do the last 2 points for free and replace itself. Like how this card has been allowed to exist for so long is kind of mind-boggling. But we kind of have a joke in our Discord that there's three groups of people in the game, and there's the Sapphire players, particularly the Ruby Sapphire players, there's the Amber Steel players, and there's everybody else. And everybody gets 1 vote on Let the Storm Rage on. And the Amber Steel players, of course, they want to keep Let the Storm Rage on. It's the best. It's the best card in their deck. When paired with the second, or it's a 1A and 1B for the best card in the deck. The red and blue players, of course, they want the Let the Storm Rage Ons to stay because it doesn't really do anything against them, in a meaningful way. Like you have to use cards in combination for it to be effective. And then everybody else has been unable to play the game for 18 months because Let the Storm Rage On exists. These are the decks that could get under like red blue, or the people who want to play set 1 Lilo or set 1 Maleficent biding her time, which is kind of an odd name for a Maleficent that's trying to get things over with. That's a whole other rant. But like you can't, like how do you put Lilo or Maleficent in your deck and like expect to win a tournament, or win an event since set 2 came out? When like your opponents are going to play Cinderella on turn 1 and let the Storm Rage on your little character before it does anything, and like you're just going to lose the game on the spot. Like I've seen, like I've played a lot of Amber Steel, and I eventually got to the point where it's like, okay, I understand that Cinderella is going to solo this matchup. Like even if I have a reasonable hand and I don't have Cinderella or Storm, I'm full shipping 7, like because the reward is so high. The reward is you literally can't lose the game. Right.
Yeah.
And like even if you don't hit, like you're still going to draw 1s and 2s because you built your deck in a way that abuses the mulligans. Like the card's just absurd. It's just, I don't know. Like if you want, keep registering 3 or 0 or however many in your Cinderella and gigantic Cinderella deck. But
yeah,
I don't think you'll catch me not registering 4 Let the Storm Rage on in a deck that can sing it on turn 2.
Yeah, so often you'll see some Ruby Sapphire list get posted, and it's just very top heavy. As we in the card game community, we would call it greedy, right?
Yeah.
High on uninkables, high on a lot of end game finishing cards, a little light on the early game, just kind of hoping, like the opposite of like what the DKP list is, which is like this
Right.
hyper streamlined, consistent, wants to do the same thing every time. Or like we call them a greedy pile. And then somebody else will come along and say, where are the aggro decks to punish this greed? And it's just, it's just Amber Steel and now Blue Steel have their thumb on those aggro players.
Yeah.
And they're just squishing them and they can't get out.
Yeah. You want to know how many best of threes I've lost since I've started playing Cinderella and Storm Rage on in, when the cards were released. Guess how many best of threes I've lost to decks with Lilo or Maleficent?
Zero.
Yeah. It hasn't happened. I don't play as much as some people, but it's like you just can't lose. You just can't lose that matchup. Like, people complain about Amber Steel, having a bad matchup into Red Blue, but it's like, we're the reason. Us Cinderella players are the reason that Red Blue is so strong.
Yeah, no, you guys
the decks that could prey on it, like, get blasted by Let the Storm Rage on.
I have a funny story, right? So I'm a Steel convert with the latest set, and I have infinite games with Ruby decks and with Amethyst decks, and like less than 100 games total before set 7 of Steel decks. And when my opponent went turn 1 Cursed Merfolk, for a year I was just like, oh my god, how do I ever beat that? I have to right? It's like, I hope I can't. I have no way of getting this off the table before the Prince John comes down. It's all hope is lost. Right?
Yeah.
And then
can I interrupt?
Yes.
I've never felt that feeling.
Well, yeah, no. So I was, I'm play testing against a buddy, and he's playing. He's trying to play the Amber Emerald aggressive deck. This was like before we knew that deck can exist, but it just needs to be all 0/4s.
Mm-hmm.
And so like they originally were like, well, what if I go all in hyper aggressive with the 1 cost 2 questers, and then I bring them back with Lady. And so I was trying out Blue Steel against that, and they like played a Merfolk on turn 1, and I just have Bell let this. I had already played a Bell, so they're like Merfolk walking into my Bell, and because it's uninkable, right? They have no choice. They just have to.
Mm-hmm.
They just have to play it, and like I just get to sing "Let the Storm Rage On." I don't even have to discard a card, and in fact, I get to draw a card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you get your card back.
Yeah, wow, what a feeling!
Yeah.
It's like this is like kind of easy when it all comes together, and so I was like, well, it can't be that likely to come together. And then Frank Karsten tweets about it, and it's like, oh yeah, when you're on the play, you get it 50. You get turn 1 Bell 55% of the time, and when you're on the draw, it's 58 or whatever the numbers are, and it's just like, oh dear, this is a problem.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
In the same regard, on the draw, you may not have experienced this being, a Let the Storm Rage on neophyte, but when your opponent plays Cursed Merfolk, turn 1 on the play, and then you play your gigantic Cinderella, and they're like, gotcha, Ursula, and you reveal your hand that has 2 Let the Storm Rage Ons in it, they just slink in their seat. They're just like, oh my god. Like, I played a 1/3. My guy is still gonna get got. They're gonna get to draw a card again. Like, the game is over at that point.
Yeah.
Like, I can attribute. I say collect your free wins, collect your free wins, collect your free wins. Put cards in your deck that let you collect your free wins. And I can attribute a ton of game wins to Let the Storm Rage On. It is a busted card. And people are saying, okay, well, people are building decks without targets. People are playing around like Let the Storm Rage On. People are like, some people aren't doing that. Some people are putting Chernobog's Followers and Raja and Cobra in their deck, and man, Let the Storm Rage On makes all of those cards look really silly.
That's for sure true.
You still have to get through the random slop at the start of a tournament if you want to win.
Or the person who didn't run into the Let the Storm Rage On deck yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna play against people who don't respect Let the Storm Rage On, and if you cut copies of that card from your deck, you're not gonna be able to make them pay for it. It's got to be it for me, fellas.
That's it. That's all I got too.
All right.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for joining us, Justin.
Thanks for listening in. See you next week.
And we'll see you again soon.